Welcome back, everyone, to Heart of the Machine demo gameplay. We have some fun to get to, including finishing our food and water. That's going to be necessary for our human pets. Going to involve some more complex production chains than what we've done so far. So there's going to be some math. Brace yourself for that. We need to steal the tungsten from a military base, so that'll be all kinds of joyful fun. I want to do a correction on something I said in the last episode. I did do a pinned comment, but I'm not sure if everybody saw it. Many people probably did not. The security jacket blending in perk. I incorrectly said that it will override mark defective. It doesn't. Nothing does. Those are electronic scans that identify that. The only way to do this is to get rid of mark defective by replacing the android or paying a fine or doing the murder another android for their registration deal. So that is going to be required there. This is for androids that don't have the blending in perk by default. Our starting three do. The red combat unit does not, and some other ones that will be invented later also do not. So that's the purpose of the security jacket, just to clear that up. In between episodes, we've gone quite a bit forward, turned 44. We have done all the routine investigations, as I mentioned. We have built some new things. We've got another human apartment. We've got one of every storage that is up. Almost all of our wind generators are up. This is the last one that is going up there, and we've caught up in all our research. A lot of it, some just routine upgrades, and others was things needed to do the food and water quest. I also wanted to take a look at our support buildings, because we've talked about a couple of these, repair spiders and network range extender, but I also did some scanners. You can see we actually can cover a decent amount, not most of the city, but a decent fraction of it at this point. And these scanners are on the perimeter. You can see this is the outline of where they can detect any NPC movement. And they cost a fair amount of electricity, but I like knowing what's going on. And if we come in here, they follow the same approach of hiding in plain sight. This just looks like a tree to everybody else. An out-of-place tree, but a tree nonetheless. Just like our slurry spiders are coming out of what is essentially a bush. And they're spiders actually walking around, not something particularly conspicuous. Then we have the efficiency or overdriver trio: gathering overdriver, refinery optimizer, refinery overdriver. And what these do is they're just going to improve our basic operations where we build them. Of course, they cost electricity and everything else to do that. Gathering overdriver is 15% more of something that's gathering resources. You can see the 1.15 multiplier there in the light blue. And you can only build 3 of these per subnet. That's listed at the bottom of the tooltip, but it can be 30 overall in your network. You can only overdrive a certain area, though, so much. Then the refinery optimizer is going to just not require quite as many incoming resources. Only 95% of the incoming. Again, the same limits, 3 per subnet, 30 per network. And then the refinery overdriver gives you 15% more output for the same amount of input. Input stays flat so that you don't have to worry about the resource coming in being consumed at too fast of a rate. And this would typically be a good thing to use, but if I were to add a bunch of these now, it would just further complicate the math we're going to need to do later on in this episode. So that's why I'm skipping that for the time being. Now on to our military raid. We've gone up here to a military base, Fort Gonda, that is nowhere near the stuff that we have. And that's the point. In case things go wrong and there are hostile repercussions, it's not going to blow up in our face, at least in terms of our established infrastructure. And you want for this at least one combat unit that has cleared its name. And I actually cleared them all just for the fun of it. Had them go do hostile acquisitions of new registration IDs. But there are multiple ways of doing this. We have the clearance to just walk in the base and try to steal the tungsten. But if we do that, then it's more difficult than if they're distracted. Say by someone shooting at them. And our androids are expendable. So if we try shooting at a mech and you don't do any damage to it, it actually won't register as setting off the alarm. So that's bad. For example, these, totally blocked by powered armor, not going to accomplish anything. And that's actually the first thing I tried when I initially did this. So you got to be a little careful. But best way is just shoot a human. You make sure you do something. and then grab another android that is clear, and now we can see, okay, we've got street sense on. That's where we steal the tungsten. And voila, these are our different choices with odds. Now, if the alarm is not set, you won't have take advantage of the chaos available. So you can have to roll with one of these lower percent chances of success, and also lower yield. The overpower them, you get about 40 tungsten, you succeed here, about 95 here. We will get almost 300 if we do this almost 100% success here. And there's actually even better ones that you can get later, but that's a whole nother thing. So we could improve this some. You can see the skill checks on cognition. We could have our combat unit where all of the cognition augments, but we're still not going to get it above about 50%. So that would not be great. Setting off the alarm, definitely the best way to go at this point. And of course, we can't just bring in a technician android with better cognition because they don't have the clearance. They can't wear military-style uniforms, so they would just get shot at the second they tried to enter the base. So there's a certain combination of things that you want to do this well. And we got it, 291 prismatic tungsten, so we will not have to do this again for a while. That's a pretty decent supply. And you don't need a huge amount of armor piercing. So we can just move away with no problem. But that's not exactly the case for our sacrificial red combat unit here. 304% incoming damage. You can see just by moving it's going to get shot at. Opportunity fire is a great thing. We're going to try to get out of range and see what happens. Sometimes they make it, sometimes they don't. So we will need a new combat unit, which is fine. We have plenty in reserve. And now we have a new mission to stack our armor-piercing rounds, and we have completed prismatic tungsten. Now to get over to the water purification side, on the other side of the city, which is where we need to get that done and why we needed the armor-piercing in the first place, going to take a bit, so I'll come back when we're set up. We are set up and in position. There's a couple water purification plants over here. Another military base, but we're not in it, thankfully. Best avoided. And there were some guards over here. They're not there anymore. Aggressive negotiations took care of them. So, investigate. We must equip armor-piercing rounds. So we've already started that, but we'll do more. We've got our red combat unit. Figure they might as well have some fun. And we've got one of them in place. We just use the item ability here. The Hack-a-Majig is a way to use an attack to get all of the enemies as much as possible to focus on you and not somebody else you want to protect. That could also be useful in this fight, but I do not expect us to need it. But just so you know what that's there for, but you just click on your item, and you can have up to 3 of these stacked, and they'll last 4 turns. So you don't want to just put them on there and use them whenever. You want to put them on there when you're about ready to fight. So that's done. And now I think we're ready to investigate. Indeed. And just in case we need it, I'll stack a couple on you. But we shouldn't require that. Well, that's a foreboding sound. And here is the Security Force cruiser that we didn't get a great look at last time. But you can see its health is considerable. Almost 1,300. And if we try to attack it with a regular combat unit that has no armor piercing, this is what happens. 0% damage, outstanding. But you can see there is an attack from above option available. And armor piercing helps, and we can use the combat unit red to do both. That's why I have him on a tall building. Hey, how about that? That's probably about the biggest surprise that cruiser has had in quite a while. So now that's the hard part, and we just need to terminate with extreme prejudice all of the grunts. Okay. So we've still got them down here. And who has an action left? You've still got one. So we didn't quite get everybody. And I wonder what our incoming damage is. Oh, you shot up here. Okay. Well, you're still fine. You're at 70%. That's nothing to be concerned about. And again, they're still alive, but they're also focused on us, not on our technician, and that is perfectly fine. A little more cognition for our technicians wouldn't be the worst thing. And the fight continues. Bit of a lucky shot there to knock them out. And that one was lucky also. Things going our way on this turn. Okay. I think everybody is cleared out. And we have acoustic nanotube filtration, which is a fancy way of saying we can turn groundwater into filtered water that can actually be used. We're going to see before long why that is particularly important and exactly how bad the water around this part is. Otherwise, this is going to be pretty straightforward. Let's just clean up all of you. And then it's just going to be time to head back and begin our building process. We have returned to the nerve center of our network. Androids are off doing useful things, wiretaps, repairing. We don't need to worry about them for now. This is about doing the math and getting this set up. Plenty of electricity, so that's excellent. We are going to start with water, as that is the easiest to deal with. So the well and cistern, this is actually a dual-purpose structure. It's going to give us 34,000 groundwater a turn, which is enough. We only need one of them. And our groundwater cap will increase eventually by almost 8 million. And the building is very respectable size, so all of that is excellent. Then the filtration. We are researching still the miniaturized filtration, which comes up after you research the regular one. But I strongly recommend against using it. It is extremely inefficient. It's just if you absolutely cannot find space for the regular filtration tower. And my advice is if you can't find space for the filtration tower, look harder. Use network extenders. You know, go halfway across the city if you have to. That's how inefficient this thing is. We're going to need 2 of these. We require 8,900 filtered water, and each of these is going to give us 8,000. Plus, we will actually need another 1,000 on top of that in order to satisfy the food side. So that's important. Notice 1.4 groundwater per filtered water, so we're going to lose some of that in the process, but it's still enough to get about 24,000 out of our well and cistern. And also notice in horrifying fashion, 0.2 heavy metals extracted per filtered water. 8,000 filtered water, 1,600 heavy metals are going to come out of that. They're toxic to humans. I mean, you know, this is at the point where only the worst countries in our modern world could even approach the level of contamination. So given that, we have a new storage that's available to us, the trace toxin storage. And these heavy metals are useful for industrial purposes at some stage. But as far as what goes on right now, we're just going to store them with a lovely biohazard symbol on it. And we're going to call that a day. Okay, so that's the easy part. Moving on to the food. Biomulcher. This is the bottom of the food chain, but it's the bottom of both food chains. Both the meat and the greens that we want to produce need biomulcher. So to cut to the finish of this, we need 14 of these to supply both, unless you're using some of the optimizers and all that, in which case you're going to have a somewhat different number. But we're going to need to go through some process here. of a couple turns to get everything in. Throw some of these in some different... Yep, we're not going to be using you. Into some different subnets. I don't know, maybe a few over here is a good idea. But we're going to need about 9 of these to satisfy the meat, and about 4 to 5 to satisfy the greens. That's roughly, but that's the general vicinity that we're going to be in. So let's see, where are we at on these? I've made 12. That's 13. And there's 14. Excellent. So that's biomulcher. Okay. Now let's move on from that to the refining. And this is an easy one to screw up, the bovine replicator. Notice that it takes in bovine tissue and produces more. It doubles it, 0.5 coming in for everyone that comes out, and 2,800 bovine tissue in total. If you do the math on the biomulch required, you need 182, I think it is, biomulch for each one of these replicators, and then 160 comes from each of the biomulchers. So each one of these is going to take a little bit more than one biomulcher to supply. We're going to want 8 of them to supply all the meat we're going to need. But it's very important that you have at least a little bit of a surplus, because if you run out, and they will run out if you're consuming too much, then they can't operate without some bovine tissue coming into the system, and then you just have to go get more from the farm. I mean, it's not a horrible consequence, but it's better to avoid it. So we're going to want 8 of these, and I'm just going to put 2 groups of 4, and another 4 up here. We'll have to advance another turn. And then we have our next bit, which is the protein vats. So 2,800 bovine tissue coming out of the replicator. These will produce 1,100 meat, and they'll require 1,320 bovine tissue to produce that meat. So if you keep it exactly that 2-to-1 ratio, then you are going to have a little bit of a surplus. And if you're even a tiny bit worried about it, I mean, in general, I would suggest going higher, actually, on the bovine replicators, put an extra 1 or 2 in there. That depends on whether you can produce enough biomulch to supply that. So you may not want to. I won't be doing it for this example, but it's very much worth considering. And now we ran out of micro builders. So we've just kind of got to wait a bit now for them to catch up. I haven't built anything in a while, but still, we're just slamming down buildings like crazy here. So we have satisfied our water, by the way. So that's a nice little bit, and it's going to give us some more research so we can work through those. And if we're running low on anything, procurement efficacy, say that 10 times quickly and you're better than me, will allow us to boost the efficiency of some of our production. That is going to be a nice thing to look at. We talked about these various items. The deals being soft power, it's the first time soft power is effectively introduced. But essentially, you know, use your manufacturing base to get into the right favor of the right people in the city. And securing water is complete. We still need to finish the food. So we've got all of those in place. The final step is the hydroponic tower, which we are going to need more micro builders to produce. So we're going to move ahead a couple turns for that. So here we could do better wells, which we don't really need, better biomulchers, or better slurry spiders. I'm going to go with the biomulchers. And that way, if I decide I want to add, you know, a little bit more bovine replication, I can just go ahead and do that. But a lot of that's going to depend, of course, on what it is you happen to need at the moment. We're going to need some more turns to get the micro builders we need. Yep, I think at least one more. Oh, which do I want here? Get a little more speed. Oh, we are so close, but not quite there, I think. Oh, we do have enough. Excellent. Okay, hydroponic tower. So let's get this down. We'll build it over here. And that is our last item that we need to build. And if we look at what it does, first of all, it takes in 0.3 seeds, outputs 0.5. So, as long as you haven't done something zany, you should have plenty of seeds from all of your field gathering, and then we're going to gain more seeds, so that's not going to be a problem. It's going to consume some more biomulch. So, that's where that extra 4 or 5 biomulches are needed to satisfy this. And then 8,800 greens per turn. We need 5,000. That's fine. This is also where that water goes. See the water per green 0.2. So that's where I figured we needed about another 1,000 water to go into this. So there's just some interrelations happening in here. It's a more of an interweb type of process to get this going. Okay, another Android. Definitely moving those faster, I think, is what I want to go with. And we just got to wait for this to get finished. No more research to do. And there we go. We have made it. We have accomplished our securing food goal. And we are now up to Grand Theft Aero. It is going to be time to take to the air and not just rely on our androids, but be able to build some vehicles. So that's the next big step in our evolution as an AI. We'll be getting into that next episode. Thanks for watching, everyone. Heart of the Machine will continue.